Welcome, everyone, to our webinar from 2024 Lessons to 2025 Predictions, Modern Data Governance and Quality. We're delighted to have you with us as we dive into the latest trends and opportunities shaping data governance and quality. My name's Julie Skeen, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Joining me are three expert panelists who will share their insights on the latest trends and challenges in data governance and quality. Before we dive in, I'd like to cover a quick few housekeeping notes. We are recording today's session, and you will receive a copy of the recording via email after the event. Also, if you have any questions during the discussion, please type them into the Q&A box. And if we don't address your question during the session, we will follow up directly afterwards. So before we jump into our discussion questions, let me introduce our speakers. We have Nicola Askham, widely known as the Data Governance Coach, who brings 2 decades of experience helping organizations reduce costs, improve efficiencies, and take control of their data. Nicola is renowned for untangling messy data challenges, addressing the root cause of poor quality data, and empowering teams with the skills to make informed data-driven decisions. A former director and committee member of DAMA UK, Nicola is a leading voice in data governance and regularly shares her expertise through writing and presentations. Welcome, Nicola. Our next speaker is David Wood, Senior Vice President of Global Services at Precisely. He is an industry authority with over 25 years of experience in information management strategy, data governance, and leadership. David is known for uniting business and technology teams to deliver sustainable, value-driven data solutions. Drawing on his experience as a Fortune 50 executive and external consultant, he offers practical insights into tackling key data challenges and driving measurable business outcomes. Welcome, David. And last but not least, Ken Butler, Senior Director of Product Management at Precisely. Ken leads the data governance product line with more than 20 years of expertise in data integration, quality, governance, and connectivity. Before joining Precisely, Ken spearheaded innovative data management product initiatives for companies like SAP and SAS, bringing cutting-edge solutions to the market. Welcome, and glad you could be here with us today, Ken. All right, so thanks everyone for being here today. I'm excited to have this accomplished panel with us as we tackle some of the most pressing questions in data governance and quality. So let's get started with our first topic, everyone. So I'm going to throw this out to the group. What are the top 2 or 3 questions you're most frequently asked about when it comes to data governance and quality? Nicola, do you want to start us off?
Oh, yeah, no, good question. And I think that has been changing a little bit. I think probably the top 2 things that I get asked are, firstly, how can I do data governance quickly? I think that one's been around for a while, but it seems to be getting asked a lot more. And I'm sure we're going to dive into the reasons why as we progress in this. And then I think the one that really makes me pleased personally and smile is I'm getting so many more messages these days asking me how I get into a career in data governance. And I would say that until very recently, I always ask people how they got into it, and it tends to be by accident, not by design. Nobody says, when I grow up, I want to be a data governance manager or data governance lead. But that is happening now. I don't know whether the kids are, but people are now saying, I'm doing data analytics, I'm doing data security, or whether I want to be into the more people side of things, I want to get into data governance. So yeah, that's really exciting and refreshing that this is actually being seen as a good career choice now.
Thanks, Nicola. David, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I would say, and Nicola, your point around how do I do data governance quickly, that is different, right? I mean, you and I have been doing this for a long time. So it used to be that data governance programs, took, a year, and then eventually we started to measure in progress by quarters. Now it's months, weeks, even days in some case. So yeah, pace of change from a data governance perspective is changing a lot, because data is as well, right? You saw the recent IBM study. It said 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years, right? So crazy, right? So the pace of change needs to keep up with that. But Julie, I would say I get asked one old question and I get asked one new question a lot, I would say in 2024. The old question, which still disappoints me a little bit from executives or folks that are either starting or trying to uplift their data governance and data management, data quality programs are, how do I design my organization? Right? Should I be in a federated, centralized, decentralized type mode? Should I have my stewardship roles aligned around function, around domain, et cetera? And why I get disappointed by that question sometimes is that I really want people to focus on capabilities first. So what capabilities do we need to deliver to drive outcomes for our business? And then let's make sure we have an organizational construct that complements and doesn't contradict those capabilities. But I still get asked about that quite a bit. And it's great, right? Because it is still a people-centric approach, which is terrific. And they're thinking about people, with all the talk of AI and automation, autonomous data governance, there is still a people component. And the second thing I get asked about a lot this year is, what should I do? Data match or data fabric? What's the approach that makes sense for us as an organization? And there's a lot of puts and takes there. And it's a lot of conversation points for organizations. I would argue 90% of them should really not be technical. Really, they're more business related. But the point is that regardless of which way you go, right? And most people are going towards a decentralized approach. I think Forrester predicted by in 2025, 68 or 70% of organizations are going to have a decentralized approach. So it's going to be certainly indexed towards a decentralized approach, which is more of a data mesh type approach. But at the end of the day, it's really around your metadata management maturity, which a lot of the technologies, that Ken, I'm sure, I'll speak to, allow us to do in a much better way than they used to. And second, around your data governance maturity. So really what I tell folks is foundationally, let's focus on rich metadata, and then building up foundational and then democratized capabilities around data governance to the organization. So there are two things I get asked about most often.
All right, thanks, Ken. Is there anything you'd like to add about what you hear about?
Sure. So being in product management, I tend to get both the front side of engagements where organizations are starting to kind of discover and understand what governance means for them. And then I also get on the other side of the engagement after they've gone through an implementation of data governance. So I tend to get questions that come from different perspectives. Now, the first question usually comes from the stakeholders or the senior leadership of an organization that just purchased a data governance solution. And that's, how do I better understand the adoption of governance within my organization? And how do I calculate the ROI? And I think what I try to remind people of is that data governance is just one part of the puzzle. If you think of a puzzle, the governance framework is essentially like the border pieces. And then you can kind of start filling in the rest of the puzzle with the people. And then, this little spot of color with the technology. So at Precisely, we tend to think of data governance as bringing together people, processes, and technology. And so when it comes to the adoption or the ROI, it's really important to ensure that there's a business objective behind it in order to start measuring results. And when it comes to adoption, it's not just necessarily how many people are using the software itself, which can be potentially a leading indicator of success, but it's really trying to understand what are all the people, the processes, and technology doing together in order to deliver on some type of business outcome. And then the second question I get asked, which is more from the user perspective, and it's about collaboration, because when it comes to data governance, it's a team sport, really. If you've ever seen 4 to 7-year-olds play soccer, you kind of get a swarm of players around the ball. But governance, you need to kind of assign ownership and accountability and responsibility, and you start seeing people spread out and working together like you would on a team.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for that. All right, so now if we want to take a shift and look back over the last year and think about what are the biggest lessons you've learned or how your perspective on data governance and quality has changed over the last year. Does anyone have any perspective on that? David, maybe do you want to start with that?
Yeah, Julie, I'll start. I would say So yeah, it's a great question when you're retrospective and we kind of look back here towards the end of the year. I think walking into the year, the general hype was that AI would drastically change data governance, right? And it would be a game changer. And there were a lot of predictions around that. The latest prediction, I think, is that Gartner says, I think 62% of data governance tasks are going to be automated in 2025. Ken and Nicola, we can debate that one. I think that they're a little bullish on that piece of it, but we similarly had predictions like that last year walking into the year. And the reality is, it's helped, right? It's helped, automate a lot of redundant tasks. There's automatic, cataloging now, but it's still very much a people-driven approach, I think, and people are still very, very heavy. So, there were a lot of concerns, even at a working level from data stewards that I, continue to be friends with and worked with for a while. Like, wow, is my role going to change dramatically, and how do I uplift my capabilities around that? And the reality is, no, it's just going to, it's really going to enhance and augment more than anything else, but true data governance really comes down to context at the end of the day as well, right? There's a lot of the statistical data quality reporting that we can do in an automated fashion, the blocking and tackling, which helps. But it doesn't really drive incremental business value, right? And that's really what the data governance programs are trying to get to, right? Either, deep operational efficiencies, obviously compliance, regulatory concerns, and protection of the organization, but really top line growth, right? And context is really around top line growth and requires a little bit of the people component to minimally, train some of the learning engines in a better way. We're doing some pretty innovative things with big pharmaceutical companies right now, and we were able to make some progress. And then when you really layer on the people component to that, that's where you get kind of the exponential, type benefits around that. So I would say for me, if I look back, that was the biggest thing from a hype cycle perspective, and I think it's played a role, but I don't think it's drastically changed. And, nor do I think we're going to be at that 60+% number that Gartner talks about in a meaningful way in 2025, but we're getting there, right? And I think it's, I don't know that it's going to be a slow crawl towards that. I think it's going to be a pacing towards that. So maybe a trot.
Nicola, you say you might seem like you might want to add something to that.
I would totally agree with you, David. I can see a lot of interest in the people I work with and talk to about adopting AI, but it's still a lot of it's still talking about it, and we're so way off hitting that kind of number. But I think picking up what you were saying, David, it really, I would have said, like, when we had this chat last year, I would have said that there was a small number of data governance people running around trying to find out who was doing AI in their organization and say, wait for me, you've got to involve me. And I think that's changing a bit, maybe not as quick as we would like. But I even had a chat with a CTO that was new in her organization. And her CEO had spoken to her and said, oh, you've been here 5 weeks now, you must understand all the systems. So can you start looking into AI for me? And she said to her, well, one, what do you want to do with it? And two, do you think we should sort the data first? And so I still think that, we're still a little bit behind, but I've also talked to a lot of people where perhaps the data governance lead has been approached by whoever's doing AI and saying, can you take over AI governance as well as data governance? So I think we're seeing AI driving a lot more requirement for data governance. And I think a lot of people are realizing that they need to work tightly together, which is really good news for us. It's nice to be wanted as a data governance person, because quite often we're not wanted, even though we know we add lots of value.
Right.
So that's true. But the couple of other things that I've really seen, I think, I've been doing this for so long, I would say the first at least half of my data governance career, a lot of it has been driven by regulation. So working in sectors that are only doing data governance because their regulator has asked them to. And I've been lucky enough to work with organizations who wanted to do more than the bare minimum. But there's been an awful lot of people saying, what's the bare minimum we can do to keep the regulator happy? But what I've seen, it's been growing, but really picked up pace. The last year, I think the majority of my clients have not been in regulated sectors. They're doing data governance because they understand the business value it's going to bring. And that's really refreshing. Really nice to actually see people going, we want to do this because it's the right thing to do. And then I think the other thing I've really seen is, I think we were talking this time last year, people were talking about data products, but really only in the data mesh context. And it's only clients that were doing data mesh that were talking about data products. But these days, I think you go to conferences, I talk to my clients, people have really grasped onto this concept of data products. I think it makes data sets more accessible to the lay business user. You don't have to be a super user or a power user to get into the data and everything. And I think that people are really grasping this concept of a data product.
No.
Thank you. Ken, do you have anything to add, or do you have any other lessons that you want to add that you've learned over the last year?
Sure, I think I would resonate a lot with what David mentioned specific about AI being probably a colossal accelerator and enabler over time. But what I looked at, I think the biggest thing that I would take away from 2024 is that when a disruptive technology like generative AI or ChatGPT starts to becoming a household name, there are perceptions of the value that it will actually be able to provide.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of proof of concepts at Precisely to better understand where AI-enabled functionality would best fit within our own portfolio. And what we really found is that AI really solidified the people part of data governance more so than I think any other year. And it's because of the large language models are only good as the data that is trained on. And there is still a significant portion of knowledge and information that are retained within the people that are managing the data and part of the data governance and quality organizations. And so as long as we can find a way to eventually be able to unlock that, AI will be an even larger accelerator. But I think right now it's going to continue to focus on being able to automate some of the more arduous and manual tasks when it comes to metadata curation or management, and help those people involved start focusing on more strategic initiatives within the program itself instead of focusing more on the tactical side of things. So I think that's where AI will become, a big enabler. And the other thing that I saw is, as technologies tend to ebb and flow. In the late 2000s, everything was about big data, and then it moved into machine learning and advanced analytics, and now we're at Gen AI. But if you look at governance kind of being the middle part of that input and output process, governance has slightly evolved, but some of the challenges still remain the same.
Yeah.
Right? It's still about being able to deliver high quality, trusted data that's supporting a business outcome. And whether it's big data or machine learning or compliance and regulatory reporting or AI, really, we still have the same pre and the post conditions.
All right. Thanks, Ken. Now we're going to take a look to the year ahead. So looking into next year, what trends or developments do you see emerging in data governance and quality? And if it's okay, I'm going to go right back to you, Ken, and see what you're thinking about for this coming year.
So I think so we partner with a lot of different organizations of different sizes, and they're all at different points within their data governance journey at this point in time. And what I've really started seeing evolve in 2024 is that organizations are finding ways to start small in order to find the quick wins. And I think traditionally, if I look over the last couple of years, even we would be engaged with customers that wanted to start big and boil the ocean. But even our existing customers that have had governance programs operational for a number of years, even they are starting to take more of a pragmatic approach in terms of how they extend governance further into their organization. And so we're seeing more team-based governance programs starting in support of analytics or even smaller AI projects, or we're seeing a single business unit being able to find and measure success with governance and then planning ways to kind of broadly extend that further across the organization. So I think the biggest thing that I would take away from 2024 is that it's okay to start small. And I think we would likely even urge you to potentially start small initially and find that success and find that win, figure out what went right, what didn't go right, and then extend the scope from there.
Love that.
Very helpful.
Yeah, I
Nicola?
totally agree with that. So, sorry, jumping in. I've been working on a data governance survey with a consultancy over here in the UK, and we were actually working on the report this morning and looking at some of the analytics, and that was the one thing really strong came out, is that trying to do data governance as a big bang approach doesn't work, which I kind of think we all knew, but it's nice that other people are accepting and agreeing with us. And that the key things for success were this iterative, start small, learn, adapt, change, and roll it out. So yeah, I'd wholeheartedly support what you're saying there, Ken. So yeah, but I think from my point of view, I think we've got this this increasing perhaps focus on data governance. I think data governance seems to be becoming more popular than ever before. But I also think that perhaps the scope of the data governance team is going to change. We always attract anything that's to do with data that nobody else wants to do. That seems to be a given. You do data, don't you? Can you do this as well? But I actually think that we're going to see a lot more teams taking on AI governance. And I think a lot of them are going to actually go and ask for it. So by talking to loads of people this last year, I think a lot of organizations kind of started AI governance not even considering data. They were talking about is it ethical to do this? How do we, they'd be talking about things like unintentional bias without really understanding that it's the data that can cause that. But they'd be having those kind of questions when it came to AI governance. And I think now a lot of organizations are understanding that you can have the best designed LLM, but you put the wrong data in it or poor quality data in it, and it's going to learn the wrong things, and it's not going to do what you think it's going to do. So I think we're going to have a lot more data governance teams taking on the AI governance role. I do think that comes with it perhaps I don't think we're all magically become AI governance experts. So I think there's lots of probably training in AI governance, or perhaps expanding your team with AI experts and AI governance experts because it's all complementary skills. And I think from my point of view, that's got to be easier if you're a business user, because it must be an absolute nightmare trying to be a business user and have a really great innovative idea in an organization these days. Because you say, oh, I know, I've got a great idea. And then it goes, oh, has it got personal data? You've got to go and talk to the data protection or privacy team. Has it got, is it this? Is it AI? And is it, it's just so hard to do anything. But if we could combine as much as possible in one approach, you can go to one team and they could say, have you considered, is it ethical? Have we met all the right requirements? Have you got the right data? I think that's going to make it a lot easier, and we'll be able to do perhaps things a lot more successfully. And I think it goes also with what you were saying, Ken, about things starting smaller. I think that's what we've got to be, smaller and quicker in kind of to support the AI projects. People aren't going to wait for us to do the full data governance. So I think we're going to have to come up with, do we come up with levels? This is you can go and play and do what you like, but then if you're thinking about using this, we need to do governance. Are there 2, maybe 3 levels of how much governance you put on the data before you start using it for AI? So I think that's going to be a big focus next year.
Yeah, I think that's great, Joel. And that whole thing around kind of start small. I think one of the paradigms that's got to change is just because you're starting small doesn't mean that you're not adding a lot of value to the organization, right? And people thought, sometimes if we're starting small, well, this is a foundational investment, not going to get value out of, the data governance, data quality efforts that we're putting in. And that's, really not the case. But you need to be purposeful. You need to be intentional about what use cases you go after. And if you do it right, you build followership, you can pressure test the model, and importantly, you drive value. And once you drive value, then you get more followership. And once things are in motion from a data governance, data quality perspective, they tend to stay in motion over time. And I think, what I see is that the more mature data governance organizations need to be a bit prescriptive, because to Nicola's point, like the business kind of doesn't know, right? They, it's a little bit opaque to them, data governance, data quality. They know they need, available information and high quality or information and data with a significant level of integrity, but they don't know what to go after. So I do feel like we need to be fairly prescriptive in 25, picking the right use cases. And, to Ken's point earlier, think program, execute project. So think scale, don't box yourself into a corner, but go after something and be prescriptive. I mean, Henry Ford said years ago, that if people would ask me what they needed years ago, they would have said faster horses, right? So you need to be a little bit prescriptive, telling them what to go other. The other big thing I think in 2025 is there's been a little bit of hype obviously around data governance and data quality, and some of the big data platforms, the Databricks, the Snowflake, some of the big MDM tools, et cetera, all claim to have data governance capabilities, right? And embedded data governance and layered in data governance. And Ken knows this better than I do, but what I think people are finding now, and they're going to quickly find, is that that's only going to get them so far. There's a pretty short ceiling, and it does provide some foundational, what I'll call entry level data governance capabilities, but it's not a scalable data governance platform in any way, and it's not scalable towards any of the architectures that we're talking about around data mesh, data fabric, et cetera. So what people are finding is that yep, I can do some baseline, if I will, like basic data governance stuff, but to really do true data governance is going to drive business value, I need to invest in a program, and generally there's technology associated with that over time as you scale and as you move forward. And I think that's the thing that progressive organizations understand right now today, and they understand what they're, even if they're starting with some of the light data governance embedded in some of these programs, they also understand that that's a step change for them to get to a broader type model. And I do feel like some people maybe think there's some sort of silver bullet because everyone wants to do it quickly, as Nicola said earlier today, but they're going to find that I'm fairly limited in my ability to scale and drive really significant value to the organization. So that's something I think we're definitely going to see change. And also, like the other big one, and I think Ken mentioned this as well, is kind of the deeper integration of AI. Certainly, and understanding where it is value added, where you can take advantage of it as an organization quickly, and then other things are going to be more, let's innovate and let's get to that stuff a little bit down the road as well. I think so. There'll be the two things, maybe a normalization of where we use AI and how it comes in. Of course, you always, if you're trying to get funding for your program, you always got to throw AI in there, right? Because it's, if you don't, you're probably not going to get funding. So there's a little bit of optics, a little bit of a game to play. But for the folks that actually have hands on keyboards that are actually doing the work and helping the business, it's going to be a pragmatic approach. But I do think we'll see some progression there.
All right. Thank you. And thank you all for those insights and the upcoming trends, all very valuable perspectives. Appreciate it. So we're actually already approaching the end of our session. So I'd like to give you each the opportunity to share one final thought or takeaway, that something you want to make sure the audience leaves with coming away from today's session. So David, back to you on this. To start off, what is something you want to make sure the audience takes away from the discussion today?
Yeah, I would think if you're figuring out how you either, uplift your existing program, or how you, do like a version 2.0 of your program, or, start your new program, I think it's important to really think about a capability roadmap for your data governance, data quality initiatives. And when I talk about a capability roadmap should have 3 roadmaps that lay below that: technology, people, and process. And I can't deliver a capability and value to the organization unless all 3 of those things lined up. There is no technology silver bullet, right? And if I have great people, great processes, but I don't have automation, I don't have capabilities in a platform, I'm not going to get there either. So really think about all 3 of those things together, and think really about capabilities. What capabilities are we delivering? And try to get that talk track with the business, less around, features, functions, around tools, less around how to organize my teams, but more around capabilities. And if you have that capability talk track, then you get to a real partnership with the business. And capabilities are, by definition, delivering against business initiatives, business value, rather than adjunct things that we used to talk about, like here's my role, or here's my data governance policy or process, or here's the technology and the metadata we're putting in, and the metadata management tool or data catalog tool. So again, think capabilities.
Thanks, David. Ken, do you have anything you'd like to make sure the audience takes away today?
Sure, that was really well said by David. I think the biggest thing that I always come back to when I get asked a question like this is just like what David mentioned, is that the software, even though I'm a product manager on a software solution, it's not a silver bullet. And the biggest thing that I would remind anyone that is already within a data governance program or want to start one is that you need to start with the processes, the people, and the technology to understand what that business outcome is. Because what I tend to say is that don't do data governance to do data governance. There needs to be a reason behind it. And so it's kind of like know what you want or what are you actually buying the solution for. And so going back to software isn't a silver bullet, when looking for a data governance solution, understand the capabilities that it would provide to you. Make sure that it aligns, the roadmap itself can align to the capabilities that you may need in the future in terms of being able to execute those projects and define the programs so that you can scale out eventually.
Yeah, I just to kind of back up what you're saying, Ken. I've worked with a customer a number of years ago who the data governance team, well, data governance was being done by IT. It wasn't really a data governance team. They bought a data governance tool. I don't remember which one. But then they complained that the tool wasn't doing data governance for them. They'd missed the point entirely that people do data governance and the tool helps them, facilitates the people to do data governance. So yeah, I think that is excellent advice, Ken. Everybody listens to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think from my point of view, I think we see a lot of people talking about data governance, but I think they need to start actually doing it.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's a lot of we're going to do data governance, or we ought to do data governance, and I think with Gen AI is changing things faster than it ever has done before. That I think people need to really start getting that foundation in so that they can embrace all these new exciting technologies and things. And I think we can be agile and perhaps do data governance quicker than we used to, but you still need a foundation in place. So you really, if you haven't already started, start today. You just get on and start doing it.
I would agree. I would agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. It looks like we do actually have a time for maybe a couple questions. So I'm gonna just pick here from the audience questions. Let's start out with one that came in that said, what is the role of data quality and data literacy to support data governance? Anybody want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, Nicola, I'll take a first. I'll take a first pass at that
David.
one, and I'll let you see. So that's actually a great question. So if you think about as we democratize, right, federate and democratize data governance capabilities, irrespective of kind of what architectural approach organizations are thinking about, it really is important that people understand. So data literacy is going to play a big role, and that's where some of the technology components are, and the capabilities that Ken had talked about are important, right? From a business glossary perspective, a business semantics perspective, et cetera. So make it easy for people to do the right thing, because you can't just give them and if you build it, they will come kind of, capability and expect them to leverage it in a way that's going to add value to the business. And part of that is really around, a lot of it's around data literacy and making people, not just that people understand what the terms are, but can they use those terms and can they use that information in the context of their business processes? And quite frankly, where should they not? Right? Because you're going to have user personas out there that are going to have different levels of efficacy with, the technologies and the concepts that we have in place, right? So if I'm using, if I'm trying to look at large data sets for some predictive analytics and to validate or invalidate some hypotheses, by definition, I need a lighter level of data governance. I need to understand from a literacy perspective, what information am I looking at, and at what level do I need to be able to trust the information to either validate or invalidate hypotheses. If I'm doing it for more compliance, regulatory reporting, financial street reporting, it needs to be super tight. So really understand, what that is. I mean, even things as simple as, what's the definition of a customer? What's the definition of an employee, right? Which seems fairly self-evident, right? But depending on the usage of that information, right? If it's more kind of predictive and a validated hypotheses, it doesn't need to be as tight. I do need to understand, more from a reporting perspective, am I considering part-time employees? Am I considering subcontractors, employees, et cetera? And you get all these nuances. So I think data literacy in that regard to really drive meaningful outcomes and not bias things, inadvertently one way or the other is super important. And I do think the convalescence of data governance and data quality is getting tighter and tighter over time, right? And so, it used to be that, people would confuse some of the things. I think sometimes they talk about data quality, they really meant data governance. Sometimes they talk about data governance, they really meant data quality. Now I do think they're getting a little bit blended together, and I think it's a good thing. I think they need to get blended together because they really should be the same concepts. And we get out of this whole chicken and egg thing first, right? Do I do data governance first, drive the business rules, then look at quality? Do I do quality first, see where I need business rules to drive improved quality, et cetera? I think you're going to start to see them come together more and more as an integrated approach.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've always felt strongly that data governance and data quality should be done by the same team. Otherwise, I think business users want good quality data. That one's an easy sell. They don't want governance. We've just got such a rotten job title. It's kind of, they don't go, yeah, we'll have that. And I worked with organizations over the years where they're done by separate teams. People don't want to talk to the data governance team because they're doing the boring stuff that doesn't add any value, whereas the data quality team are giving them better quality data. So yeah, and I think I think you're right. They should be seamless from the business user's point of view. So the closer we can get them together, the better. And I think that I agree with what you're saying, David, about the data literacy. I didn't call it data literacy training until the last couple of years where it's become like the buzzword for it. But I've always done some really basic, what I used to call like data culture training or training for everybody in the organization about data being an asset and valuable, because the vast majority of people in an organization don't think data is their job. Now, we all know that it is everybody's job. Everybody is either inputting data or using data or probably doing a bit of both, but they're not thinking about data, or if they are, it's just perhaps the inconvenient bit that makes doing their job harder because the data's never right, or they don't get it in time, or it's duplicated or something. And I think doing that kind of basic data literacy, not the analytics and the advanced stuff, but I think that really basic data literacy should be part of implementing data governance. It supports it. So, it's so fundamental.
So thank you. The next question, and this probably applies to a lot of people in the audience, what advice would you give organizations that are just starting their data governance journey and are also looking to support AI or Gen AI initiatives? All right, Nicola, go ahead. You look like you're jumping.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to make a really big assumption, which is always dangerous, that people joining us on this webinar today are actually data governance people rather than the AI people. But there could be some enthusiastic AI people who wanted to find out more about this data governance thing. But I think it's really important, if you're the data governance person, to find out what's going on as far as AI and Gen AI, and go and explain how you help these people. The same way that I would say you need to talk to data, to every stakeholder in terms of the value you bring, what problems are you going to solve. I think you need to go and do that. The last thing you want to do is go and say, hi, I hear you're doing AI. Stop. I'm the data governance person, and you've got to go and do data governance first. I think that's a really bad idea. You've got to go and win them over, explain and sell the concept to them, sell how you're going to make sure they use the right data, their initiative's going to be a great success, and perhaps not everybody's going to live happily ever after, but that kind of thing. I don't know whether Ken and David would agree with that one.
I think that's a good point of view, because I think it's data governance ultimately is a team sport, and there's a lot of collaboration between both the business and the technical sides. And so I think the data governance person involved here would be able to help guide or lead anyone involved within a new AI initiative or a project to better understand, do you have fit for purpose data? Who owns the data? Who's accountable for the data? What's the quality of the data? Is this going to introduce any type of bias? And I think those two or a larger group of people can work together to kind of create that framework together, instead of having to do one and then do the next. Work together in synergy to kind of accomplish those goals that you both would have in mind.
Yeah, I love this question, Julie. I would say kind of two things, right? Well, one is focus on the why and not the what and the how, right? Make sure you have the why locked down. And Ken brought this up earlier, there's got to be a reason to do data governance. As people are starting their programs, they get very, very focused on the what and how, and they lose sight of the why. And around that why, set expectations. You control the narrative on what good looks like and what success looks like, right? So if you're going to go down a why path around Gen AI and some more predictive, more autonomous stuff, set expectations about what success looks like and what that timeline is. Because without doing that, people are going to set their own expectations, and they're going to become probably pretty impatient with your progress, right? And then also, if you're going to do something that's not kind of AI related and you're going to go after specific use cases, really correlate what we're doing from a data governance perspective to the business outcomes that they want to get to, right? So if it's around perfect order, if it's around inventory optimization, make sure you're tying the data efforts to those things so that when you have the talk track around the success, it's not, I forgot about this stuff that was in the background, to Nicola's point, right? Is that no one pays attention to, but make sure you're controlling that narrative. Organizations that control the narrative and outline how data governance is an enabler, not a have to do, but a want to do, are much more successful over time and have much deeper efficacy with our programs.
All right, thank you. I'm going to try to sneak in one more question because I think this ties into what Nicola was talking to, and I want to make sure everybody's clear. So how important is building a data culture now, or should we now be trying to build on AI culture going forward?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Yeah, that reminds me. I was doing some data literacy training for a client earlier in the year, and we were actually working on it and creating it, and they got in contact and said, actually, can we put something about AI in there? And I think, you know, the reason why they were doing it was that I hope they have now, but they didn't have an AI usage policy in their organization, and they'd suddenly become aware of some employees using Gen AI for the right reasons, but they put client data into ChatGPT. And I think it's this, you know, and I think it was what you were mentioning earlier, Ken, wasn't it? People just don't understand.
Right.
They think that this has all the answers and is great, and they didn't understand that by asking ChatGPT to analyze this data, they were putting client data on the internet, and that it was available to people. And I think that was a huge awakening for people. And I think this is something new, and people don't get this. Still, I still get people, even though it has the little disclaimer on it, people say to me, is ChatGPT always right? And you go, no, it's not. If you've not read it, it even tells you, it has a caveat at the bottom, says it can make mistakes. And I think, I think it's a brilliant question, because I think you're right. I think perhaps it's AI culture, data and AI, because as we've already been covering a lot in this webinar, I think they go together. But I think we need to get people to understand perhaps the limitations of Gen AI, what it can be used for, what it can't be used for. I think it's really powerful if used correctly, but you've got to choose the right things to use it for. So I think that's right. Yeah, perhaps having data and AI literacy programs going forward would be a very good idea.
Right. Well, thank you to the speakers. We appreciate that. I think that's all the time that we have today. I want to thank our audience for joining us today and for this very engaging and thoughtful discussion. As a reminder, throughout our conversation, we've explored several critical items like the foundational importance of metadata maturity, the convergence of governance and quality practices, and as all of our speakers talked about, the critical role of aligning people, processes, and technology to move your data governance from strategy to action. So a key takeaway today was that while tools are important, they must complement your strategy, and governance is ultimately about creating a framework that delivers measurable value and builds trust in your data. So as we look to 2025, modernization efforts and the seamless integration of data quality and data governance across cloud native and multi-cloud environments will be essential in helping organizations unlock the full potential of their data while addressing the growing complexity. So a big thank you to our panelists today for sharing their expertise, and to all of you for your thoughtful participation. If you have additional questions, please reach out via the chat or contact us at precisely.com. We appreciate you joining us today and look forward to seeing you at future sessions. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you.